Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you all here. I want to welcome everybody to our Social Justice Committee's program, Big Ideas in Mental Health, which is part of the Nova Scotia College of Social Workers. And today we will be speaking about housing. First, I want to begin by acknowledging that I am speaking from Mi'kma'ki. And indeed, the Nova Scotia College of Social Workers is in Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, whose inherent rights were recognized in the peace and friendship treaties that were signed from 1725 to 1779. This series of treaties did not surrender Indigenous land, resources, or sovereignty to the British Empire, but instead established rules for an ongoing relationship between nations. The treaties were later reaffirmed by Canada in Section 35 of the Constitution Act in 1982, and they remain active to this day. The Nova Scotia College of Social Workers joins our members and our communities in the necessary labor of reconciliation. We are grateful to live and work together as treaty people in Mi'kma'ki. Please think of the lands, territories, and Indigenous peoples who lived and continue to live within these lands, and how each of us individually and as a collective body of social workers can hold ourselves accountable to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples here and across Turtle Island. We are all treaty peoples. Ulaliu. Thank you all. I want to say a special thank you to our Social Justice Committee. The Big Ideas in Mental Health program is a special program organized by our Social Justice Committee as an opportunity to rethink some of the major social justice issues impacting the mental health of Nova Scotians, to invite new and creative ways of thinking that challenge assumptions and open us up to new solutions. I want to say a very, very, very special thank you to our two Social Justice Committee members who organized today's panel, Michelle Towell and Patricia Stevens-Brown. Thank you both so much. And I also want to say a special thank you to our panelists, specifically Dr. Jeff Karabanow from Dalhousie, Nick, Eric Jonsson, who works with Navigator Street Outreach, Crystal John with Adsum for Women and Children, Lori Edgar with Affirmative Ventures, Yarnell, Arlea Watts with Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center, and Sheena Jamieson with the Halifax Central Library. And before we begin, I will stop my screen share, and I want to now invite Jeff to unmute and say a few words.
Hi everyone. My name's Jeff Karabanow. Like Ann noted, I'm a prof at the School of Social Work at Dalhousie. Also, one of the founders of Out of the Cold Emergency Shelter, and currently the co-director of the Dal Social Work Community Clinic. And I'm quite honored to be here today. Trauma affects us all, right? With differing impact, but it has huge effects on all of us. Traumatic experiences impact us more when we are in fragile states. And homelessness is trauma. We are psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally fragile when we don't have a place to call home, when we don't have a safe environment to live. It affects every fiber of oneself, our identity. And COVID has and continues to be a traumatic experience. It's a disaster, just like homelessness is a disaster. So I have I've spoken quite a bit over the last 10 years around housing and homelessness. So I thought today what I would do is show a short animated film. It's a story of COVID and the homeless sector in two locales in Nova Scotia. It's a snapshot, it's a portrait of a particular time when the world shut down. I was lucky enough to be part of a group that was meeting daily uh, to try to figure out best practices to support those living on the streets. This is a short animated film that kind of talks about those times, and I think it's relevant for what we're going through. So, Anne, would you be able to show that film? And that's my time. I mean, I know we have 5 to 8 minutes. This is a 7 minute discussion. This is a story of people who tend to be forgotten a lot or ignored. It's a story of folks we call homeless. They're living on the streets, at parks, in shelters, or couch surfing. You've probably seen some. Maybe you've smiled, said hi, given them some change, or maybe you just walked past. It's also a story about a group of folks who work in the homeless sector. It's not a complete story, but a snapshot of a particular point in time. That time was when the world experienced the COVID-19 pandemic, a global disaster. A group of researchers from Dalhousie University and Cape Breton University were interested in documenting the impact of COVID-19 on the homeless sector in two communities, Halifax and the Cape Breton Regional Municipality. That's in Nova Scotia, a beautiful eastern Canadian province. So we did interviews with people who were homeless during the pandemic and also service stakeholders. We wanted to give voice to the experiences of homelessness during the pandemic. We knew it was bad. We wanted to know how bad, in what ways, and what responses worked well. And this is what we learned. First, and no surprise to anyone in the field, homelessness itself should be considered a disaster. Yes, the pandemic was a disaster, but homelessness has always been a disaster. Even before the lockdown, shelters were full, people were couch surfing, squatting, living rough. They're outside in all kinds of weather, in parks, on sidewalks, in the woods, anywhere they could find a space to lay their head. Then COVID hit and the world shut down. Literally shut down. We were told to stay the blazes home, wash hands, wear masks, physically distance, and we obliged for the greater good. But what about those who don't have homes, can't physically distance, and have no means to buy masks or places to wash? They told us they were basically abandoned. I mean, we're all in the same boat, right? Or are we? We're definitely in the same storm, except some people ride it out in yachts, others in dinghies, while some are just treading water. And a lot of service providers felt very angry about that. Shelters had to reduce the number of beds, services like drop-ins, health clinics, detoxes, counseling, soup kitchens, all had to close. Even common hangouts like libraries, where you could use a washroom, get a glass of water, use a computer, meet a worker, or get some food, closed their doors. Some nonprofits had to work really hard to get the funds they needed to move quickly to offer help. The impact was real. All in all, those experiencing homelessness felt abandoned, exposed, and isolated. They told us they were left behind. Those experiencing homelessness during the pandemic told us they were more stressed and anxious, that it took both major physical and mental tolls on them. Think about it. The general strain and stresses of living through the pandemic, they're heightened considerably when you just don't have a safe space to be. While being homeless is hard enough, Think how adding a pandemic to that puts you basically in survival mode every single minute. And to make things even worse, there's just no available housing to get folks off the streets. Some people tried couch surfing, but we were all scared of each other because we needed to distance and stay in bubbles, so that didn't work. They tried being outside, but that didn't work either, because even outdoor public spaces were off limits for a while. To make matters even worse, Nova Scotia was, and is, experiencing a housing crisis like it's never seen before. Rents have increased dramatically, affordable housing is in major decline, and expensive condo development is exploding. And then on the flip side, you have really caring and concerned folks, shelter providers, social workers, housing providers, healthcare workers, people from food banks, other nonprofits, and government people meeting pretty much daily during COVID, trying to figure out what to do. Everyone is stressed, scared, confused, and generally anxious. There's no roadmap here, no real plan to navigate the pandemic. But everyone really rallied to keep people safe. Shelters reworked their spaces, some even moved folks into hotels. Pretty good idea while it lasted. In Cape Breton Regional Municipality, they opened comfort centers to provide basic needs like washrooms, showers, laundry, and a bit of human connection. In Halifax, they piloted a harm reduction initiative where they provided regular doses of alcohol to individuals with alcohol addiction. And a dedicated public health line was created for organizations across the province. It was consistent, trustful partnerships between different organizations that really made the difference. These are all good outcomes, but we need a lot more of this, especially now. So, what have we learned about homelessness from living within a pandemic? Going forward, and in thinking about disaster response, we must always have marginalized populations at the forefront of our thinking and think through how responses, policies, programs, and even language include or exclude them. By seeing homelessness as a public health crisis during COVID, housing became understood as a social determinant of health. Thus, the key insight is that accessible, safe, appropriate, and affordable housing for all is a human right. Also, homelessness was a disaster before the pandemic, and people who are living on the fringes are suffering now more than ever. So while there's been some few good things that have come out of this disaster, for the most part, it has deeply amplified the challenges of poverty and housing. The real question is, now that this has been exposed, how do we ensure we don't go back to what we did before? Because that was a world that ignored the disaster of homelessness.
Sorry, I was on mute. I said, Jeff, any closing remarks you would like to share?
Um, we have a this, we have a report. We have an executive summary. We have the animated film. I know some people are asking in the conversation piece, how you can get that. We will be sending it through Center Policy Alternatives. I think Ann is going to send it out as well to everybody, and then we are going to put it on a public YouTube. Right now, we just finished it last week, so right now it is on I think just a private YouTube channel, but we will hopefully try to blitz this out. I mean, it's a way to kind of, create a deeper understanding of these dynamics for the public. I think this is probably not new to any of you, but but you know, I think it allows us to start to think through homelessness. Like I've noted many times, is a disaster. There's no reason that anybody should be sleeping on the streets in such a rich country like Canada. I was working in Guatemala years ago with young people on the streets, and they were amazed when I told them that I was also working in Montreal and Toronto with young people on the streets. They were amazed that that something like that could happen in a country that is so rich, and it's always stuck with me. I mean, these are political decisions, and we see how you know, movements like the guaranteed annual income, when the federal at the federal level, when they want this, they can roll it out very, very quickly. And we saw that with the CERB right at the beginning of the pandemic. And we do have to be considering safety nets for everybody.
Thank you
And I'm
so
sure we'll have
much.
discussion. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And indeed, we will be sending the video out along with a survey later on today to everyone on this call who registered. Okay, I want to invite Nick now to unmute and share a little from his perspective.
Good afternoon. It's really good to see everyone here today. It's a very, very important issue. My name is Nicholas Jones, and so just a little bit quick, brief background for myself. I am affected with mental health and addictions. Yes, for a long time, pretty much all my life. First off, I'll just say there's a lot of stigmas I've found over the times that I've gone and gotten help and stuff. A lot of times it'll be very much, oh yeah, you came from this and that. People don't out there don't understand where, you know, it doesn't discriminate. It can affect anyone. I was adopted, and I come from a family of both medical doctors. And so I've lived with all the perks, and I descended into mental health, and addictions fell through the cracks. And I've ended up living on the streets in Toronto, under Spadina Bridge in Toronto, to be exact. I've lived, Shea Pops helped save my life in Montreal for many years when I was younger. And I've experienced homelessness here in the streets of Halifax and also Winnipeg. You know, I think people's idea of what homeless is needs to be addressed. Like, what exactly does homelessness mean? Is it the guy with the brown paper bag sitting on the corner? Yes, it can be, but it can also be the person that has to decide if they're buying their meds this month, or if they're, you know, going to eat. Like, there's a huge gap here. Like, it's massive, right? People, you know, I found for myself, when you're homeless, I spent all my time and energy. It was a full-time job. Let me tell you, for the first thing I'll say about it, it is not easy to be homeless. It is very difficult. It ain't all cushy. People aren't throwing you hundreds of dollars and you're eating, you know, KFC. No, it's not that, you know. It's a very dark, depressing, cold, lonely, sterile place to be, right? You know, I've slept on grates. I've slept in parks. I've had lots of help from my parents, but because I was not taking my medication properly and was affected with drugs and alcohol, there was unfortunately nothing they could do for me, you know, at that time, but be there on the other end of the phone. And I was one of the lucky ones. I could actually have someone to call. You know, your best friends when you're homeless are your animals. People always say, why do those homeless people have animals and stuff? Like, God, they can't even afford to feed themselves. Hello? What did you just say? They can't even afford to feed themselves. Well, let me tell you, the reason being people have animals is because it's a safety and it's a love. We are people that need to be touched. We need to feel. We're human beings. It's in our DNA. It's in our nature to want to be loved and to be safe. That's not a lot to ask, is it, of a developed country? To be loved and to be safe? I don't think so. You know, the cold hard truth of it is follow the money, okay? Like, to be honest, and God love them, there's lots of people out there in government that probably do fight really hard, but there's no money in homelessness, okay? Now, the paradox, that is the irony to that, is that without the poor, there can be no rich. But there's actually no money to be made in building houses for the homeless or actually putting money into it, unless there's a photo op involved. See, and unfortunately, it always comes back to where the funding comes from, because that's where the money comes from that we need in order to put forth all these wonderful ideas we can have, you know, creating, you know, bridging the gap between the streets. Like, why are policemen having to do mental health? I don't get it. Policemen are not, I don't go to a barber to get my tooth fixed, you know, like, come on. Why are people who aren't trained, and there's no facility set up with people who are qualified to be to handle these situations, and let the police be the police? They get a bad rap out of it too, you know? I mean, for me, the barriers that I found for myself was actually, I could go to a warehouse. Although it's easy to get off the street if you want to go into a warehouse and you want to be in constant fear. I've slept with my shoes. You guys, I'm telling you, I've slept with my shoes under my pillow. Okay. I've been in shelters where people have been, you know, stabbed with needles, you know, in the middle of the night. You know, this is Canada. Come on. Right. Like, where have we been for the last, you know? I mean, it's just people have they group together because we, you know, we have nowhere to go. So we go to the Salvation Army. Okay, great. So you've got 2 housing coordinators there for 300 men, 2, and they're trying to fight to find an apartment for $508. Do any of you pay $508? I don't think so for where you live. And I'm not putting it down. If you work for it, you deserve it, okay. But just remember, there's a lot of other people out there that can't pay $1,000, $1,200 for a 1-bedroom apartment in HRM and across Canada, you know. So what are we going to do about that? How are we going to bridge that gap? You know, some control over rents, you know. Maybe we don't need 50 new condos that are going to charge $2,000 a piece with a gym and a nice pool, you know. And never mind that homeless person on the corner. We'll just push them to another part of town or throw them in a Sally Ann or a Turning Point. They're good enough. They got food. They're okay. Meanwhile, the rich get richer. You know, I'm passionate about it because I've lived it. You know, I've lived a life of privilege, and I've also lived a life of degradation, loneliness, and despair and darkness. You know, there is ways we can fix this. Not just backing a dump truck of money up, but allocating that money, getting the money and allocating it to the services that are put together by people like us here today that might voice, you know, what's the problem here, you know, because everyone brings something. Everyone brings something like personal experience, right? You know, churches, churches have done more for me over the years than anything else. These are organizations that, you know, God love them. I'm not a religious person. I'm very spiritual. You know, my God is nature, right? I think I see the beauty in nature, but it's awfully hard to see the beauty in something when you're looking at it through a really dirty mask, right? You know, definitely I feel we need more at the street level, at the ground level, more, but then again, where do these housing coordinators find these places? There is nowhere. There's absolutely nowhere to find. You got all these nonprofit organizations because there ain't no one in profit stepping up because there's no money in poverty. You know, and they're all fighting for this one little piece of the pie, you know. Meanwhile, we've got people out there wandering around talking to themselves, not on their proper medications, you know. Oh, must have come from a broken home. I didn't come from a broken home. You know, I didn't come from that, but I sure experienced it. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And any one of us sitting on here, circumstances. There's a story behind that person that's sitting there, like we just saw in the video. I go out of my way to make eye contact with people because I know when someone would do that, when I was sitting on the street, it made all the difference in the world. Wow, someone recognized me. I'm a human being. I deserve dignity. I deserve to have a right to clean water, affordable housing. You know, we do not too bad considered how bad it is. But, you know, the more the public can be aware of this, like I'd go on a tour and talk across Canada if I could raise money, you know, like that's what we need. We need people out there in the gymnasiums. We need people at these, town hall events, things like that, advocating for what's going on out there. Young girls, you know, the prostitution, the violence. It's all stems right from the beginning of if you don't have adequate housing and a stable place, your life is not even, you're beyond the 8 ball before you even start. I don't know. I just feel really strongly about it. And I guess to sum up what I'm trying to say is ground level and government. We need someone in government to finally step up and be that cool dude that I wanted to always see there. Like, and I know you're influenced by all these other people in government. You can't just, I wish in a way, we could have someone get out there and get right next to the prime minister and have a conversation like this right on TV, where we could say to them, we need help, please help us. Because I know that if people were more aware of it and it wasn't such a dirty little secret, that we could make change. But I digress, I'm just very, very grateful that you guys asked me on here today. I owe everything to, and I had a little rant, but I will also say, thank God to all the social workers out there and the people that are here today that have helped me help myself. I'm currently sober, clean, put my life back together, and that was from the help that I had to get. But I was also very lucky. I'm a little bit educated, so I could navigate things. We didn't even get into that part of it, So my God, have you got a few days? We'll give her.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to ask now for Eric to unmute.
Hello. All right. Thanks, Nadia, Michelle, and Patricia for organizing this. And thanks for putting me after two pretty awesome presentations. I don't know how I can follow that up. But I'm going to try and be quick because I have to be out here at 10 after 1. So I don't know how long this is going to take, but I just want to kind of talk about a few things. First thing, I want to preface my comments by saying I'm a bit angrier than usual this week. There's been some pretty extreme weather, and I've seen some people in really bad situations that kind of stick with you a bit more than usual. So I'm sorry if this comes across more jaded and grumpy, but that's kind of how I'm feeling this week. I don't always feel this way, but it just seems to be one of those things that's going around. And so, yeah, so I guess just to start with, I fully believe in the principles of housing first. I want that to be clear. People need a place to live. You shouldn't have to be housing ready. You shouldn't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. Everybody deserves a place to live. And I think when you get somebody a place to live, they can start, people can start really succeeding and thriving in life, and nobody should be on the streets ever. Nobody should be on the streets in the winter. Nobody should be on the streets in the summer. No, nobody should be on the streets, period. And I think that's something that we all can agree on. And I think that's really where I'm kind of coming from for this speech panel discussion, however you want to call it. So yeah, I guess ideally we need to house people who are struggling with their mental health. I guess this is a panel about mental health and homelessness, and clearly there's a big kind of overlap there between people who are homeless and people who are struggling with their mental health. But what I want to really talk about is the people who are really struggling with their mental health. I don't know how to say that more technically, but just the people that the systems are not working for, the people that are been denied from different shelters, the people that can't go to different places because they're just not kind of, I don't know, the systems don't work to support those kind of people. So I'm thinking about folks that are sleeping outside because they can't go to shelters, folks that can't, maybe they've been housed in the past, but they never got the proper supports. And so they're living in park benches and they're sleeping outside in -15, -20 degree weather. Because technically with housing first, we should be able to get these people housed and then get them the mental health supports and get them the proper services that they need so that they can, not be homeless. We can end their homelessness. But those, to start with, maybe in the past, those kind of housing resources existed, but right now with Halifax's such low vacancy rate, there's no housing available for people who can't, shine their shoes and look nice for the landlords, because the landlords have so many, can discriminate against so many different things. And the landlords choose, they're not going to choose the person who is talking to themselves, and they're not going to choose the person who's dirty and smelly from sleeping outside all night. They're going to choose, the nice young couple or the nice student and all that stuff. So in the past, it was easier to get people, housed, but right now it's there's just no ability for that kind of stuff. Sorry, I'm just reading the comments. Can people hear me?
Yes, I think we can. I think that Norma's having a problem with her sound.
Okay, all right, great. I just saw that comment. Sorry about that.
I hear you.
Awesome, thank you. And so where was I at? So yeah, I guess what I'm talking about is our current mental health system is ill-equipped to deal with these kind of people that I'm talking about. Oftentimes people who are living outside or people who are living on the streets don't have a phone. They don't have like Nick was saying, sometimes stuff gets stolen in shelters. So if they're in a shelter, maybe their watch was being stolen, or if they were in a shelter, or if they're even on the streets, maybe they'll trade their phone for some food, or they'll trade their phone for whatever they need to survive that day. So they don't have a way to make appointments. They don't have a way to keep track with people and to access our traditional services. And also the traditional services just aren't built to follow that up. A lot of times you get notifications with email or phone calls and that kind of stuff, and it's so hard for people to do that. So our current mental health system is not equipped to deal with a lot of the people that I find in my day-to-day kind of working outside and talking to people outside. So I think Halifax, and I guess my big idea here is we need some more non-crisis driven mental health supports. We do have community mental health teams, and we do have the mental health mobile crisis, at least in the HRM. I don't know if that's what kind of mental health supports exist in the more rural areas, but in Halifax, we do have the mental health crisis team, but they're very crisis driven. There's not a lot of supports for people who every day is a crisis, when their normal living outside kind of state of mental health is what most other people would consider a crisis, because there's just not the resources and there's no teams for that. So I guess my big idea is some kind of assertive community treatment team. In other cities, they have it where there's mental health supports that go to where people are. And, you know, and sometimes it goes to people that are living in parks, and sometimes it goes to people when they've got their apartment, and that they can go and support people when they're living inside somewhere. But a lot of the people I see outside right now don't have any kind of mental health supports, or they have a prescription, or they have an appointment with the doctor or the nurse to get their injection 2 weeks from now. But living in a tent or living on a park bench and just kind of struggling to survive every day, they're not going to make those appointments. They're not going to do that. And so we see them floundering. You know, people don't make their appointments, and then they miss their injection, and then their mental health rapidly declines. And then it seems more often than not lately, and this, I hesitate to say it because you're kind of increasing that stigma of, you know, people who are mentally unwell might be dangerous. But I've seen it in the last couple of weeks of just people who, you know, are doing poorly because they missed their appointments because of these things, and then they punch somebody in front of a grocery store, or, you know, they get involved in some violent interactions with police or other people. And myself and other people who see these people and watch their mental health decline, you kind of call it. You know, you're like, well, yeah, I could have predicted that happened because they missed their appointment, because they, you know, didn't know what time it was, or they didn't want to, or they had other things on the go at that time. So unless we tailor the mental health supports to people who are really struggling, I think we're going to continue this, you know, homelessness to prison to homelessness pipeline that we always see. And so to break that, we need some kind of assertive community treatment team. And that's something that I feel like is sorely lacking, or at least a way that clinicians and mental health providers can get out and see people in the community. Because also in times of COVID, it's probably safer, I think, to see people outside and see people in the parks than it is to bring them into their offices. So it kind of works both ways on that. And I think just so many times I had a couple clients in the past that I've dealt with that struggle, you know, and you just see them living outside all winter, and they go to the Abbey or they go to Merge, and they might pass a capacity test. And so they're released back to living outside, but they're so resistant to that they don't want any help or anything like that. And so they just decline. So for years on the streets, until eventually somebody often takes away their capacity and puts them into some kind of, which I know is terrible, but it's much better for them. Or they get some lucky streak and finally somebody takes a risk, a landlord would take a risk on them and get them housed, and we can provide the supports then. But sometimes people have to spend years on the streets before getting the supports that they need. And I think it just hurts you to watch that, like, physical and mental health decline of people living outside year after year, all year round, because there's no supports available. So yeah, I'm recognizing that I'm going over the time that I wanted to, so I apologize for that, but I guess that's my big idea. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so very much. And now I'm going to invite Crystal to unmute and share.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So according to the Mental Health Commission of Canada, 25 to 50% of our homeless population are living with or suffering from mental health illnesses. And we are all very familiar with society's view of our mental health and mental illness. The stigma increases when you also don't have a home to go to or to live into. The cause of your homelessness can become the mental health you experience, and not the system of health. We do not have a system that consistently takes care of our homeless population. If you think about it, probably the majority of the people on this panel got up this morning. We, took our time to get ready. We prepared for work. We have a home that we can call our own. And if we have mental health illnesses or challenges, then we got up and we probably took our medication without any concern for whether it's available there or whether we have to make a choice. Often, if you don't have a home, everything that you do depends on your shelter. So if someone's living in a shelter or in a tent, when they get up in the morning, every hour of their day is thinking about how they're going to be, where they're going to sleep at night. So imagine if they have mental health challenges and they have medication that they have to take. It's unfortunate because a lot of the time the local organizations will take care of them, but they themselves have no security. And we know that if there's no security in having a roof over your head, then it becomes a real challenge to be able to even attempt to take care of our mental health. Our mental health is reliant upon the resources that we have around us. And I know I see firsthand how the impact of trying to secure and maintain housing in an out of reach housing market. You know, currently here, it is detrimental to the health and well-being of most of us, but especially those who are living with homelessness. We think about, you know, right now in Halifax, a one-bedroom apartment, an average one-bedroom apartment is going for $1,600 a month. Often it becomes a choice for many, a roof over their head or the medication to help maintain their mental health and their mental state. But if there is no roof over their head, then those basic things that we take for granted, getting up and meeting with friends and, you know, keeping ourselves sane, so to speak, finding ways to have care of ourselves becomes a constant issue. I mean, we can't even, or those who are struggling with homelessness can't even think about going out and having a coffee with a friend, because all of their time is consumed with, how do I just stay alive today? It is consistent survival mode. And so that becomes a real challenge for service providers like myself. I think about, you know, there are some systems that really do well. And one of the things is supportive housing. You know, those who are struggling and living with mental health illness really do need spaces where they can get support in other areas of their lives. And it doesn't matter how much effort goes into what the other things that we need in our lives, because if we don't have a roof over our head, then none of that really matters. That's the basic for, it should be the basic. I mean, I think human rights should say that everybody deserves, well, we do say that everybody deserves a roof over their head. We often don't mimic that in our society. We often have stigma. You know, you think of organizations like my own, Adsum for Women and Children. We support families in maintaining their housing. We have programs that help to house and then continue to maintain that connection that they need to support themselves in being a part of society and continuing to stay housed. So often our mental health can affect housing. So if someone is living in an apartment, but their mental health is struggling because they don't have access to counseling, we definitely don't have enough services to support those who are living in homelessness. We don't have enough support for them on an ongoing basis. And so we need to really consider how we can, as service providers, ensure that we are meeting those basic needs for folks. Let's see. So also I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, when you don't have a home and you find ways to support yourself, your basic needs, this can mean that people who are forced to be in situations where they are out on the streets are then running into issues with the law on a consistent basis. It may be because they are what we consider loitering outside, asking for money, which is, you know, one way that they do support themselves. And I mean, I know that we say we shouldn't give money to people because they're going to use it in such a manner. I often say, if somebody is asking you for something, I think we need to give with the heart to support them in that and not judge why they're asking for it or where they're going to spend it, because that really isn't, you know, for me anyways, I tend to think that, you know, if we are panhandling, as they call it, in our city, we've started to restrict where those who don't have a home can actually get funds, where they can access those type of resources. We prevent them from being on the streets. They are consistently harassed by law enforcement, because it could be shop owners who are saying we don't want them on our streets. So there's the stigma of being homeless. There's the stigma of being on the street asking for money. And I think, you know, we need to support that in some way. And also, I mean, we can't talk about homelessness and mental health without also factoring in some of the systemic concerns that we have in our society. And I think about racism as one of those things that takes homelessness and mental health to another low. You know, when we factor in that there are systems that are literally designed not to provide proper care for those who are brown and Black. And that's just a reality in our city in Nova Scotia. Often people feel like there isn't a history of racism in Nova Scotia. And to that, I just say, we need to dig a little deeper into our history and be aware of the systemic barriers that African Nova Scotians and people of color face every single day when they're coming into the medical system. One of those things is that here in Nova Scotia and across the country, statistics on African Nova Scotians and Black Canadians are not kept in our medical system. So we can get some stats, but it's very difficult and challenging to get stats on African Nova Scotian mental health challenges as well. So that's, for me, is another issue where we really need to be inclusive, not asking after the fact and adding in after the fact, but actually building on systems that look at race and race relations and look at diversity and include that in the process, as opposed to adding it as an add-in once we've already created a structure. And I think just one of the things I'd like to say in closing is that in the last couple of years in working in homelessness, one of the things that I've understood is that to really help ease some of the pressure from folks who are living with homelessness is that we should be standing beside them and advocating with them, not for them. We need to be the voice that they can't be when they can't speak, but also allow them to speak when they can and be that strength and support behind them that says, yes, I'm agreeing with this. Because often when we treat people with dignity, they then have more hope to continue to do the things that we take for granted on a daily basis. We can forget that many who are homeless have done nothing wrong. Being homeless is not a crime. Being homeless is not something that people do because they are looking to get things. It is something that happens because of circumstances, and it can happen to any of us. I think that's one of the things that, you know, I've learned over the last couple of years in talking with women and men who are homeless is that it was a day or a decision that changed their lives. And I think that we can do well to really stand beside people. And one of the models that I think is probably one of the best that I've noticed is Mosh. I think of Rick Nurse, who recently retired, and I mentioned Nurse Rick because he had a way of making people feel like they were important. He gained the trust of many in the community, and especially a lot of the women who would not go to any of our other mental health facilities. They wouldn't walk into a hospital, but they would literally ask for Nurse Rick so that he could take care of their issues. And I think we need more models like Mosh. We need to be funding more models like Mosh. We need to ensure that those who are out there on the streets have all of the resources. We can collaborate with government, but government needs to be able to understand in collaboration, it means that those who are on the front line should be the front leaders. They should be the ones, give them the money, allow them to create the systems that will help and move us forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think I want to put that last sentence on a t-shirt and have all of us wear it. It's so awesome. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
All right, I want to now invite Lori to say a few words.
Hi, everyone. Well, it's a lot of good information today. I'd like to just share a little bit about affirmative ventures in our housing model and how we actually get into housing. So we seen it as an issue 20 years ago. If I knew then what I know now, I think we may have looked at it a little bit different. And how we even got into housing is that we were an employment training nonprofit organization who works with people who have a mental health diagnosis. But people were coming to work and they were saying that their rent was going up between $5 and $15 a month. And they're very stressed. How are they going to pay it? So at that time, I went to our board of directors and I said, okay, we're having an issue with some of our employees. So we seen it as an issue back then between 5 and 15. Can you imagine where we are now? So from there, we really did a lot of research and we decided that because our employment programs, we have 5 social enterprises, we looked at how do we help people move forward and have stable housing, a place that they can call home. So at that time, in 2007, we opened a 10-unit apartment building. And that was for people who would live there for 5 years, get some stability underneath them, get a job, because we have quite a few programs that help people. It's more than just a roof over your head. It's creating a home and creating the skills to maintain that home. So we thought still it's more than just an apartment. So the tenants looked at, they contribute to a tenant savings plan of $10 a month, and we match it with $90. So when they do leave in 5 years, they have a plan, then they have $6,000. But over the last few years, we found that even if people are working, the amounts of the rents are very, very expensive. So where do the people go at that point? So what we did was we are in the middle now. We hope to break ground on Main Street in Dartmouth for a 45-unit affordable housing. And we also looked at seniors who need housing and need support. In the meantime, what we did, we bought a few duplexes because we found that not everybody wants to live alone. So we have where 2 or 3 people live together and they share in the rent. All the rent is affordable. But we're taking it a step further. It's more, how do we help people build equity? Is we're looking at how do we help people buy homes? Do we buy a 4-plex and people buy into it? We've always known that mental health is at the core. What we have been very successful at is, and we use more of a holistic approach. So the supports are around the table, no matter who we work with. What's been difficult is that we have never received any housing support to support the people in housing. So how do you grow when you're working with more people? I've been very fortunate that we've been able to build a relationship with 2 landlords. So nobody has to go through a credit check. Their history doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where they came from. So that's been good. But one of the things is still, I find everybody who comes through here, we say we need mental health support or we can't help you with housing. And we have been very lucky that we've been able to build those relationships, and I can make a phone call and get people connected. But I'm not talking about a lot of people all at once, because we have some of the navigators are working with 300 people, I think you said, Nicholas, and we would never be able to handle that amount, but we see it as a need. I think we get very frustrated. So, the stories, when you go down to see the tents, it's sad. We can all get frustrated. So I think one of the things is that we just try, for us, you need different housing models. And we already know that. So our 2 housing models are affirmative house, where you live independent. And the other one is where you share, and everybody's doing very well. And then if you do share and then want to move into your own place, then we help you with that transition too, because there is skills that you need to learn to maintain that apartment. It's just not a matter of getting in that apartment and okay, that's it. Are you eating? Are you going to your appointments? So we have built the team around the person, and we all take a piece of it. And the people we work with are very successful. But it's those models, and I don't know, as we branch out, what kind of different models. Like Eric, you mentioned, which I thought was good, everybody should have a roof over your head, which I believe that too, but I'm not sure if our models fit that. So we all can't do the same thing. I think that's it for me, really, because I like to listen to other people, but I find we don't have crisis. And one thing that we do, because of the mental health support, I built that relationship over the last 14 years. I always feel like I'm still new at housing. we've only had to access the mobile crisis 3 times in 14 years for our people over 30 that we work with. But what would the 2 of them, if the clinician communicated with me at the end of the day, we would have only had needed 1 on a Sunday. So I think that, and no emergency visits. So I think that has helped the person. Nobody wants to deal with that. That the person deserves better then. So if I find that people are going through a rough time, or they know, because I see them our store and our building is right close. So you see people coming and going every day, then you can address things very quickly. And we build a rapport with people. So it's even in our building, we have built like a cooperative model where people look out for one another. But I know we're just one little tiny piece. But I'm hoping if we get housing support, because we just applied, if I can get that, I can do affirmative homes. We can do 50 new homes. And we already have the connections with the landlords. But we can't do it with our current staff. We have 3 of us here and we run 5 social enterprises. So
thank you. And
yeah, thank
that's
you.
Affirmative Ventures for those of you wondering. And thank you for helping us see the power of being proactive and preventative and building equity as opposed to a crisis management model. I want to invite Yarnell now to share some thoughts and reflection.
I'm so nervous. Hello, everybody. My name is Yarnell. I'm from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I'm not that good at public speaking, so you're going to have to bear with me as I try to say what's on my mind. I'm a former tenant of Affirmative House. I worked closely with Lori, the last speaker, and they helped me get out of a really tough situation that I was in a few years back. I got involved with them, I'd say maybe 2012. I was a tenant in Affirmative House. And I have some notes here that I'm going to read off of. I wanted to say thank you to Michelle for reaching out and inviting me to this. I've never done a discussion or anything like this on homelessness or anything. So I'm actually really, I'm blown away at all the knowledge that everybody before me had. So thank you for your work. That's much appreciated. So I'm just going to read some of these questions, and I've got some notes for them that I just wanted to go over. How does being unhoused affect a person's mental health? For me personally, back in 2007, I went into a bankruptcy, and my life pretty much spiraled from there. And it ended up that I was staying on the streets within Dartmouth, and just I constantly walked. I walked everywhere. I couldn't stop walking. And I think one of the biggest things that stand out to me now as I look back is that it's actually opened up my mind quite a bit to a totally different world that I was used to live in. I like to think about the positives as well as the negatives. So I just wanted to say that it opened up my mind to, oh, I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous.
You are doing so great. You really are. Everyone is sending you love right now. Just take a moment and breathe in the love that everyone's sending you. You are doing so great.
Appreciate it.
You are amongst friends.
I appreciate it. So yeah, so basically when I was homeless, I started noticing a lot of things that I never would have noticed before. Like I started gaining a new appreciation for a lot of the things that I lost. And that's I actually I started believing in a higher power. I don't know. I started thinking beyond myself, and I think it was a good thing for me. But at the same time, it was weighing heavy on my mind as far as like mental illness goes. At the time, it was weighing heavy on my mind. There was a lot of things. I started doubting myself a lot. I started to question why things were happening to me. I was incapable of seeing the help that my friends and family were trying to give me, but I couldn't notice that. All I kept thinking about was, why is this happening to me? How did I lose everything that I had and all that stuff? Before going into homelessness, I've been pretty much independent straight out of high school. I went to college. I went to CompuCollege College. I finished that. I got my diploma in business. I had my own apartment. I had my own car. I had my own business. It was a website that I was working on. I've always been doing web design and web development. So I've always been independent. And up until that point where I started living on the streets, I started to realize that it can all just go just immediately. It just spiraled ever since the bankruptcy. The next question, how would you describe the effect of having insecure or no permanent housing on a person's mental health? I'd say the biggest thing for me at the time was having to depend on other people to do things, and having to live by the rules of others in order to, like, for instance, stay at my mother's place. When you have what you had and you lost everything, and somebody, tells you that, you got to do the dishes, clean up after yourself and all this other stuff. It's hard to accept that. I found it very hard to try to cater to other people's rules. I know it was my mother and all that stuff, but it was very hard for me to let go of what I had, and I was just angry. And yeah, that's that part. What would be the benefit of supportive housing to an unhoused person? I think the benefit, it would be a total mind shift, because you would go from worrying about like what you're going to eat today. That was a big one for me. Half the time I didn't know where I was going to eat and where I was going to get some food, up until I went to the shelter, and they told me you can go up the street to Hope Cottage in Halifax to get a meal. And yeah, I lost my train of thought. Okay. What can
You are doing good. And I'm going to send you, by the way, this chat. I'm going to send all of our speakers copies of this chat, because there's so many people pouring love out to you right now, Yarnell. And what you are doing is you are speaking from the heart. And the only way that people's opinions change is when you move their heart. And that's what you're doing. So draw strength in knowing that you have everyone's loving support right now. And we all want to hear and appreciate your words and your wisdom and your experience.
I appreciate that.
acceptance and surrender are tough ones, hey, Arnell?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is so true.
Good for you, brother.
So where are we at? What connection do you see between justice issues and housing issues? When I was living on the streets, I went into a Shoppers Drug Mart, and I'm not exactly sure what I was thinking at the time, but I stole something, and I'm not used to stealing, and I got caught for it. And they ended up sending me to an adult diversion program, I think it was called. And that was actually one of my first times getting involved in the law. So what connections do you see between justice issues and housing issues? I'm not really sure how to answer that. But me personally, I think that all young adults deserve to have their own space, whether that be an apartment or whatever. I think it would be good if, if somebody was just out of high school or whatever and they were looking to get their own apartment, I think it would be good just to kind of give them that opportunity. I know sometimes you need credit checks and all that other stuff, but I think straight out of high school, I think they should have the opportunity to do that without kind of, I don't know how to put it, but yeah.
You're putting it beautifully.
How could supportive housing be culturally sensitive? From my understanding, culturally sensitive is being aware. Is that correct?
That's definitely a great definition.
Okay. I think maybe some education. I think it would be good if young adults, let's just say right out of high school, if they were educated on the importance of owning your own space, paying the bills and all that stuff. So that way, when their time has come that they are ready to move out, they don't have any issues or anything. But I also think the responsibility should lay with the property owners as well. Some training in diversity and maybe some risk management of young adults and how they would, like, what would happen if they can't pay the rent or something like that. I think I think young I think I don't know how to put it. I think it's important that young adults should be able to get their own place when the time comes that they're ready. Are the systemic processes designs that the barriers which contribute to homeless and providing supports? I don't really know what that question means. Systemic processes.
We're really talking about racism within the larger system and the ways in which sometimes those people who are forced to struggle as against the injustice and racism are then overrepresented in the homeless population.
Oh, okay.
So and it's really about, those were questions meant for everyone to reflect on, and everyone's sharing from a different perspective. Our goal is to have people share from their heart, and that's something that you did so beautifully. I hope you will see all of the comments in the chat after, because you touched so many people and moved so many of us.
Nice. This is a great thing you guys have going on, though. It's I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't expecting this. So yeah, if you had a magic wand and could somehow solve the issue, I think with that question, I think for me, community services. I think if they played more of a role in the recovery process, maybe. Like, okay, they offer a check. They offer their check every month, which was great. That helped me out. I'm thinking maybe they could do, like, I don't know, some sort of mental health assessment to see where a person stands. And the reason I think community services is the place to start is because if a person is coming to you asking for help, then I think that would be just the best place to start. If somebody's asking for help, they need help to pay the rent or whatever, I think that would just be the best place to start. Community services. And one takeaway that you want everybody to know about. One takeaway, it took, when I was living at my grandmother's, it got to the point where I couldn't even get up off the couch to do anything. I wasn't washing, I wasn't cleaning, I wasn't brushing my teeth. I just slept. I literally just slept 24 hours. I had no oomph to do anything. And all it took was one person who cared enough to come see me on the couch and have a conversation with me. I'll never forget it. Oh my goodness. Her name is Nancy Trenchard. All it took was for her to come have a conversation with me. And she had the right connections to get me an apartment. And I promised her that day, if I could get my own apartment, that everything would be okay. And to this day, I still remember that conversation. So I just wanted to say to all the social workers and stuff, I appreciate everything you guys do. It takes a special type of person to deal with other people's problems. So yeah, that's all. That's it.
Thank you so very much for sharing that. And I really hope that you go back. I will send you I'll send everyone the transcripts, because there's so much love pouring out through the chat transcript for you. And thank you for the gift of giving back to social workers as well, and reminding us that what we do can make a difference.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for speaking from your heart. It has touched all of us profoundly. There's a small change in our order of speaking. Arlea is going to actually go last, and I'm going to ask Sheena to speak next. So thank you again so much, Yarno.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so my name is Sheena Jamieson. I am the community navigator for the Halifax Public Libraries. So I'm a social worker in a library system, which, if you're thinking that's weird, you're probably right. It's very new. It's very new to the library system and how it works, but it's a lot of us are popping up in library systems across Canada because for a lot of folks, especially if you live at the intersection of homelessness and mental health issues, you probably go to the library a lot, and it may be the only place that you have. So part of my job is to help support staff, and I directly supervise our security team to make sure that we are as inclusive and barrier-free as possible for people who are experiencing homelessness, or for people who experiencing isolation. Sometimes we're the only folks that people talk to in their day, and that we're reducing barriers and making sure that the library is as accessible as possible, and that we're not, punishing people and homeless people for, existing and being in the library and coming to the library and defending their right to be in the library all the time. So we're slowly sort of finding, because I think the greatest disservice to people who work in libraries is that they don't have any kind of education around how to work with people and how to work, especially with vulnerable people. And they absolutely do their best, and they try very hard. And but if you don't know, you don't know. And if you want to learn more, what happens? So that's why positions like mine are here. And I would say, Crystal, thank you for the way libraries have stepped up to be partners with our homeless population. COVID has taught us a lot around just when the library is shut down, all the basic needs can go. So food, washrooms, a place to sleep during the day. Even curbside service didn't really address a lot of things during the shutdown. So lots of people said it better, but I think, at least from my perspective, what I would want people to know about this issue, or I want people to know the most, is I would really love if government levels of government stepped up in a way that they should, and not play hot potato with the issue of who is responsible and homelessness or addressing affordable housing. And I really deeply hate the approach of not it, and building policies that are sort of barrier first instead of, not to be precious about it, but the idea that you house our most vulnerable should be something you do with pride and with joy, and that you should fund the people who are doing it. And that's not the approach that I feel. It's very much a, well, I don't want to and you should. Well, I don't want to and you should. And that social work education works in lots of different places, and the libraries is one of those where I get to train a lot of our staff and work with our security folks and be informed by the regulars who are here, and I think libraries can play a really important part of that if we know how to do it and where we fit in sort of the circle of care and continuum of care that lots of community agencies see. So we see folks like Eric every day and Mosh all the time. So we're also here. It's worth saying, if there's anyone here who the library can support your work or fit in to support you in any way, I am here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to now ask Arlea to share some final reflections.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. I apologize for that quick switch. I am home with a sick little, and we have a lot of background noise going on, so I had to move down into my basement office. Yarnell, I really appreciate your words today. It really did touch me. Same with Nick as well. Thank you so much. And I don't know how to kind of follow everything up at this point. A little bit about myself and about the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center. So I was working within the housing department of the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center for close to about 1.5 years, and then took over as the shelter manager of our shelter up on North Park Street. And I'm sure, as a lot of you know, that shelter has been shut down, but I am still on board to support those folks who are now living in hotels. So I've seen a variety of different aspects of homelessness at this point. I've worked in everything from housing people, housing folks, both as Indigenous and non-Indigenous folks in my past, and then also now as a shelter manager and seeing what that looks like. So I'd really like to kind of start off with stating that I'm for housing first, always will be for housing first, and believe that everybody needs a safe, secure place to live. And at what level of support is kind of the next question that folks need. So, and as much as I would love to stay employed with a shelter, we know that shelter systems are archaic, and that housing is the way that we see a lot of people thrive, and that as well. So, but coming from that, From an Indigenous perspective, we always look at the colonial, the colonization of our people and how that continues to affect mental health of the Indigenous population, and then also how that still stems into affecting their mental health and homelessness. Sorry, I'm also just reading kind of the questions out as well. We see a lot of our folks in the urban Indigenous population, they actually don't access some of the supports and some of the shelters that are available. We see them living in the woods actually and surviving on their own. So that adds another layer to their mental health and that as well. So we've seen a lot of folks that don't want to come in and access mental health supports. And that speaks to that systemic racism that we're seeing, and that as well. There's a lot of hard advocacy that happens from an Indigenous perspective, from either myself or my colleagues and that as well that are supporting in housing, because we are running into a lot of discrimination. A lot of landlords, as soon as someone identifies as being Indigenous, it just adds that extra barrier and that as well. So that alone also affects people's mental health in that it kind of increases their I'm just trying to think of the word, increases the self-confidence they have within themselves, or decreases, sorry, that self-confidence they have within themselves to stand up and advocate for themselves. And I know someone had mentioned about, I think it was Crystal, had mentioned about advocating with people instead of for, and giving them that power. And that's something that we do try to do at the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center, and sometimes we run into a lot of those barriers and that as well. So that also still maintains that kind of poor mental health that people are experiencing. So that's a challenge in that we run into. Again, so that speaking to the cultural support, going back to kind of that supportive housing piece and bringing in the cultural in that as well. Is in those housing pieces, identifying, is there a mandate overall? Is it going to be specific to one culture? Is it going to be specific to the African Nova Scotian and the Black Canadian culture? Is it going to be specific to Indigenous culture? And that's where we're hoping to open up some housing opportunities that are specific for our Indigenous population, so Indigenous women and Indigenous men specifically, and then also I think there's going to be a co-ed opportunity in that there too. And we've recognized that when our folks, when folks who are Indigenous have the opportunity to connect with culture, their mental health improves, their well-being improves, they feel more connected, which then is a motivative piece to continue working with housing and to continue to support themselves and become healthier. So that's a big piece that we are seeing as well. A lot of advocacy, a lot of pushing within the system, so within the hospitals, within the police force, even within EHS, and as well those systems that we have to be in contact with on a daily basis pretty much. Working with them to also be more culturally sensitive when working with our homeless population and identifying to them what's helpful and what's not, and working with them in conjunction. And that as well, because at the end of the day too, even if it's mobile mental health, we see maybe some not so culturally sensitive folks that are speaking with them. And that's just a lack of education necessarily, but it's sometimes it's not helpful. We've had folks identify to us that it's not helpful for them because they don't feel that connection. And that can bring up some concerns on our end in that as well. I'm just trying to think here.
You're doing good.
All right, I have like so many things open. I'm just trying to think of how to word some of these questions. I don't want to take away a whole lot from our other amazing speakers, and that as well. I believe that their stories were impactful and super meaningful around all this, and have hit the nail on the head for a lot of it. I think I just speak from an Indigenous perspective at this point, that again, going back to those colonial systems and wanting to look at that and just kind of almost dismantle those systems to identify that there's a better way to support our folks who are Indigenous. and I think honestly, overall as humans as well. But one thing in terms of social workers to identify something to take away is remembering that folks are still people. And that needs to be kind of the first thing, regardless of what they're going through, the trauma that they've experienced, the trauma they continue to experience, and that as well is that the individuals we work with are still people and deserve to be treated as such, and that we can all work together to kind of dismantle those barriers that we all experience when trying to access the system. I know Eric had said there's just not the supports out there, and we've witnessed that. I've witnessed that just in the last week alone, that we just don't have the supports to help some of our folks that are living on the streets or living in hotels to keep them safe, which is really unfortunate. And people land back on the streets in a situation where there could have been a different way, but those supports just aren't there for them. But still remembering that they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone who has joined us and who has shared of their stories, and so grateful for the multiple perspectives in terms of political and systemic and personal, and the ways in which heart, mind, spirit have been able to be touched and brought together. And obviously this is a much larger conversation. And we at the Nova Scotia College of Social Workers are committed to continuing to create more opportunities for connection and conversation. In fact, next week we will be talking about, we'll have a special panel talking about the government's recent decision to fight the human rights of people with disabilities who need accessible housing choice. And obviously that is an intersection, and we will be having someone speaking about the ways in which current shelters are not set up to address the needs of people who are gender diverse, for example. So there's so many more components to this conversation that is at the foundation of so many of our conversations around mental health and wellness for all Nova Scotians. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. There will be a video that will be posted to our Facebook page. Please, if you don't yet like us on Facebook, please do, because then you will get to hear all of our other conversations. We have another panel conversation happening next month that will be specifically on the mental health of the African Nova Scotian community. And then in March, we are working on creating a large community town hall where we, in partnership with the Canadian Mental Health Association, where we engage our members to stand alongside all other Nova Scotians impacted by mental health challenges and work to ensure that our political leaders will hear and listen to our voices. And we're working on a lot of advocacy to help ensure and lift up your voices who all spoke today, and all of you in the chat, so that we can come together to try to solve some of these problems and create the world that we all deserve. I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing, and thank you all.